federal freezes, NIH funding, and RFK Jr. Hello, I'm Dr. Haydee Brown.
And I'm Dr. Sonya Sloan.
And we are
eh-yah,
eh-yah, Black and Brown Women Disruptors in Healthcare and Beyond. Let's get to it. Let's acknowledge that the Trump administration launched its shock and awe approach noon on January 20th. The goal is to distract, overwhelm, and eventually have people disengage. We at eh-yah and the MeidasTouch Network will not be deterred by the Distractor-in-Chief. So let's jump to it. The White House Office of Management and Budget released a memorandum on Monday night announcing a federal funding freeze to take effect at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on January 28th. All federal agencies, quote, must temporarily pause all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance, end quote. All federal financial assistance? Let's just roll that clip.
This morning, another sweeping action by President Trump as he remakes the federal government in his first full week in office.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Overnight, NBC News learning that the White House has ordered a freeze of federal aid starting at 5 p.m. today.
My administration has been moving with urgency and historic speed to reverse every single disaster of the Biden administration.
The new head of the government's budget office saying in an internal memo obtained by NBC News that the pause extends to, quote, all federal financial assistance and activities affected by President Trump's recent executive orders, including foreign aid, non-governmental organizations, DEI, woke gender ideology, and the Green New Deal. The memo says Social Security and Medicare will not be affected, and neither would payments directly from the government to individuals. But many Americans get federal funds on everything from loans to food aid to farm assistance indirectly, and it's unclear if those programs would be affected. The order says it's targeting the parts of the government that will be changed by President Trump's recent executive actions that could include everything from some efforts to lower prescription drug costs to clean energy jobs and programs. Congressional Democrats overnight saying the president's actions, quote, put the financial security of our families, our national security, and the success of our country at risk.
The federal funding freeze actually coincided with many states and providers losing access to the Medicaid portals. And that's through which they draw down funds and how they're able to validate whether patients have active insurance or not. So just on an individual level, a patient yesterday would go to the doctor. The doctor's office would try to check the Medicaid portal to see if they have active insurance, and they get an error message because the Medicaid site is down. Imagine, this is actually what happened. Luckily, a federal judge temporarily blocked 47's freeze on federal funding. A U.S. District Judge Lauren L. Ali Khan issued the ruling just before that 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time deadline. Trump's plan sought to align federal spending with his executive orders targeting fossil fuel production and diversity programs. I mean, one immediate consequence of that freeze, of course, that Medicaid portals were frozen, would have been a disruption of critical services. So the freeze would affect the U.S. Department of Education's disbursement of federal school grants. That delays students' financial aid and potentially causing layoffs for teachers and staff. Luckily, this judge's temporary block remains in effect until Monday, February 3rd. And what programs, if you freeze all federal spending, what does that look like? It looks like no Medicaid. It looks like no school breakfast and lunch programs. No Section 8 rental assistance, no Title I education grants, no temporary assistance for needy families, no states grants for childcare, no Head Start, no SNAP, which is WIC, which is food stamps, no food stamps, and no EPA grants for clean water infrastructure. So no SNAP, no Medicaid, and no food for kids in schools. What do you think about this, Dr. Sloan?
I think we need to remind everyone who this is really going to hurt. So SNAP recipients, represent lots of different races and ethnicities, but specifically the largest group that SNAP affects is white Americans, 37%, and African Americans at 26%, Hispanics at 16%, and Asians at 3%, and Native Americans at approximately 2%. So the majority receiving federally funded social services are children, you guys. This is who's really going to be hurt by all of this. That makes up 41% of welfare users, children. And 12% of those Americans are aided by this federally funded handouts, as they want to call them, are to our seniors, people that need this, things like Meals on Wheels. So let's just think, all of this went down very quickly. And then just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, we have the NIH freeze. Let's roll the clip.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. As of today, it looks as though Donald Trump is in the process of freezing federally funded cancer research in the United States. You got that? Cancer research. Why? Well, to be totally honest, we're not sure. But on his orders, the National Institutes of Health has frozen everything. Cancer research, Alzheimer's, diabetes. There's a lot not to like about the American healthcare system, but health research is one of the things that we do really, really well here in this country. We spend a lot of money on it for good reason. The NIH has a $48 billion budget, which funds 50,000 grants to 300,000 researchers across 2,500 research institutions nationwide, all over the place, studying all kinds of things. Institutions filled with some of the brightest minds from all over the world come here. I know some of them, some of my family members came to the US so that they could conduct gold standard research in medical innovation to try to cure diseases that bedevil us. It's been woven into the fabric of this country for decades.
And so, I mean, this even hits me personally. I serve on an advisory board at MD Anderson here in Houston, Texas. And seeing some of my NIH friends and cohorts talk about last week when this freeze hit, they were confused. They were frustrated. There was like a lack of hope because there was no way, no one had answers. The NIH shutdown was affecting hiring. It affected travel, all scientific communication. And this comes at a severe consequence of research, not just for research sake, but for the public health, you know? And so now grant funding depends on experts, review panels like myself, advisory councils, which ensure that these proposals align with the NIH priorities that has been going on for years. So by canceling meetings, disrupting processes, delaying critical research, and ultimately keeping millions of people who are affected by cancer each year from getting the most rigorous scientific data implemented into life-saving cancer programs and protocols, it's just crazy. So I quote one of our NIH grant researchers that spoke with MSNBC that this pause right now has a long-term impact in the United States on scientific progress, potentially affecting Americans for years to come. So, Dr. Brown, I'm just befuddled at this point, but you know, I guess we saw this coming, Project 2025, right?
Find out. We're at the find out phase.
Yeah.
You know, this really mimics Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine, which argues that crises are exploited to push unpopular neoliberal policies that can benefit corporations while disempowering citizens. This strategy, known as disaster capitalism, uses chaos to drive deregulation and privatization. Similarly, issuing over 200 executive orders in just 10 days can overwhelm and weaken the resistance. And you know, what better way to do this than to put a few billionaires and some of your political allies in positions of power and authority? So, Robert F. Kennedy, he had his first Senate confirmation hearing as the nominee for the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So the motto of the Health and Human Services is improving the health, safety, and well-being of America. This cabinet position's role is to advise the President of the United States on all health matters. The Department of Health and Human Services oversees programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, the National Institutes of Health, Food and Drug Administration, and the HHS is massive. It has a $1.7 trillion budget, over 80,000 employees, 115 programs, 11 divisions. The significance of the position of Secretary of Health and Human Services cannot be overstated. So former U.S. Ambassador to Australia, Caroline Kennedy, RFK Jr.'s cousin, publicly urged the Senate to reject this nomination. She joined over 75 Nobel Nobel Prize laureates, alongside thousands of medical groups and physicians. Let's just go to this clip.
Kennedy Jr. is our top story, President Trump's nominee to be the next Secretary of Health and Human Services. He'll appear before the Senate Finance Committee for his first confirmation hearing today. Now, ahead of that, his cousin Caroline Kennedy is speaking out, warning senators that while RFK Jr. is family, he is not the right choice for this job. In a video posted to social media, Caroline Kennedy accuses RFK Jr. of being a, quote, predator who should be rejected by the Senate.
Now that Bobby has been nominated by President Trump to be Secretary of Health and Human Services, a position that would put him in charge of the health of the American people, I feel an obligation to speak out. Overseeing the FDA, the NIH, the CDC, and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, agencies that are charged with protecting the most vulnerable among us, is an enormous responsibility and one that Bobby is unqualified to fill. He lacks any relevant government, financial, management, or medical experience. His views on vaccines are dangerous and willfully misinformed. These facts alone should be disqualifying. I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together. It's no surprise that he keeps birds of prey as pets, because Bobby himself is a predator.
Dang. I mean, when your own cousin, your family comes out and calls you a predator, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s confirmation as the Secretary of Health and Human Services would mark a highly controversial shift in our U.S. public health leadership. He's known for his outspoken skepticism of vaccines and promoting conspiracy theories. His appointment could undermine truly the trust of all the scientific-based policy making that we have. Critics have warned against his leadership. Hell, even his own family has. But this could disrupt our critical public health initiatives, weaken our vaccine confidence, and politicize health regulations, posing significant risk to national and global health efforts. So as our country faces this ongoing challenge, such as infectious diseases, TB outbreak right now, yeah. Mental health crisis, you bet. Healthcare disparities, we already know. The direction of the HHS under Kennedy's leadership remains a matter of intense scrutiny and true concern. But what do you expect when you have a schizophrenic leadership, as 47 is, that is creating this turmoil, dangerous not just for millions that live in America, but also our fellow nations worldwide, with off and on again alliances to the World Health Organization? Dr. Brown, I'm at a loss because we're definitely in trouble.
Find out phase.
Find out phase.
Find out phase. I mean, the first weeks of this new administration have really ushered in, I would call it the second wave of anti-science, anti-fact United States democracy. The first wave was during 45. Now we're in 47. You know, these appointments, these cabinet appointments, specifically that of the Secretary of Health and Human Service, impacts us all directly, individually, through food and drug safety, right? You know, milk, is the milk spoiled? What's in our milk? Listeria. Through research, NIH, cancer research, diabetes research, disease control and prevention. I mean, bird flu seems to have jumped. We're killing flocks of birds. There's so much information that falls within the purview of the Secretary of HHS that it is critical that they are respected and true sources of information, especially during national emergencies. So just a reminder that the goal here is to be distracted, to overwhelm, and to get us to disengage. And we here at eh-yah and the MeidasTouch Network will not be distracted by the disaster and Distractor-in-Chief.
So thank you for watching. We are eh-yah, contributors to the MeidasTouch Network. We're proud members of the Meidas Mighty. Please subscribe, follow, like, share, comment, and we'll see you next week. Have a great day.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.